Let's pray. Lord, tomorrow is Ash Wednesday, but for tonight, it's fun just to get together and to cook and to remember our connections with one another and to enjoy all of your blessings that you bestow on us. Thank you for Clark's willingness to be on camera, cooking, teaching all of us amateurs, and for everything that brings us together in these strange times. May we find moments of happiness and joy. And bless us as we cook and eat in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Jesse. It was very kind of you. We're going to have some fun tonight. We're going to do cornbread and a jambalaya. You know, today is Fat Tuesday, so in theory today, if we were more stringent Roman Catholic, we would be eating up and using all of our fat, all of our leavening agents, all of our fun calorie food as we would prepare for a season of fasting and of reflection. Personally, having grown up with my mom, who was raised as a Lutheran, I still do separate out an item or two for Lent to help me be a little bit more reflective. And this year we're going to be giving up the classic chocolate motif, because I think that's something that a lot of people will do. And I like chocolate a lot, and hopefully that will help me be more reflective onto what the sacrifices and the season is to mean. Sometimes that can be a struggle as a small business owner, is taking the time to be reflective. But thank you all for coming out tonight. So I do still cater and cook professionally. That does not give me all of the answers or make me correct. So if you have any questions or ways that you do things better or different, I'm happy to learn with and from you. And the way that it works in your house is always the best way to do things. We're going to knock through the 2 recipes and take some questions and answers. And we're going to do just a few 2 or 3 technique items that make a difference. And the first one is, you know, as you can see, I have all of my ingredients out. And this is really critical if you're going to do an important baking or cooking activity. So you know you have what you need. You know that your milk didn't go bad, that you really do have an egg. When you're cooking just for your family, you can do a little more on the fly and make substitutions. But if you're ever going to do it for people you really care about, or, you know, on camera, you're going to want to make sure you have all of your stuff in place. One of the things that separates the really, really strong bakers from the not strong bakers is a flour technique. And a lot of people will take their measuring cup and be like, I have a cup. And maybe they'll go through and they'll try to level it. Well, that is not a bad thing. It is not your best choice. If you were following any recipe written before 2000, you really want to scoop it and fill your measuring cup. And that's going to allow for the product to settle, but not be pushed down. And particularly for things like cornbread that can come out very dry, if you have too dense of an amount of flour, it's going to soak up more of the liquid and be a dry cornbread, which is not fun. So that is something that you just want to be aware of as you go about your day when it comes to baking. Baking is the science, cooking is an art form. All right, so let's see here. We've got a fun shiny silver bowl, and we are going to make sure your oven is on to 400. Should be preheated at this point. Okay, and we're going to put in our melted butter, which I melted a little earlier, but it being Cleveland and my house is not superheated, it started to unmelt. Yay, winter. So you've got your butter. You're going to add in your milk. I just use 2% because that's what we drink at the house. Whole milk is going to have a little more fat and give you a richer texture. And 1 large egg. Just go ahead and set that in there. And my favorite, I love a whisk, because it's just such a fun word. So we're just going to bring that all together. which doesn't take more than 4 or 5 seconds. Do a little mixy mix. And then what makes it fun when you're doing this, where I had there's the flour. For cornmeal and for cornbread, all of your dry ingredients go in together. So it's just a flat dump, very much like making a pound cake. I've used a blend of coarse and extra fine cornmeal because I like the texture. And that's the fun thing about cooking at home. Little dish of salt. And then baking powder. Make sure you're using powder and not soda. Soda requires an extra level of acid to activate, whereas powder has a dry acid already in it, so you don't have to worry about that. And then what you'll see here is a really lumpy, very quick stir. So just enough to make sure we've gotten all of the ingredients loosely together. Pretend I have some rhythm. And then you want a greased pan. So I've already pre-greased this, and you can use butter, you can use a spray if you would like. That's a lot easier and much more common in this day and age. Do not use an olive oil spray or anything like that, because those flavored sprays or olive oil itself is going to give a beautiful flavor, but not to cornbread. So I'm just going to scoop all this right on out and into my pan. And then use the back of my little rubber spatula. Whee! So if you're lucky enough that you have a friend that'll come by and do dishes, use as many dishes as you can when cooking. So cornbread, we're not smoothing it out. We're just dumping it in, making it semi-even, and into the oven it's going to go for roughly 30 minutes, or as I like to say, until it smells done. I'm not really big for timers. So, yeah, timers are very important in baking. If you are going to leave the kitchen, I'm obviously standing right here next to the stove and the oven, so we will be able to smell that when it starts to get that nice caramelization. I do like my cornbread a little firmer and let it start to caramelize across the top because it makes it nice and crunchy. And you know, that's the option of cooking for yourself. You get to do those things. All right, so cleared the space. Cutting board, a sharp knife. If you have a sharpening stone or tool, you should definitely be running your knife across the sharpening stone at least every other time you use it. I probably sharpen my knife or put it across the stone
Clark, I think you muted yourself.
Clark, can you unmute?
All right, so as you can see, once again, I have put everything in place, if we want to be fancy in French. And you can see I've pulled all of my spices together, my tomatoes, the rice, celery, etc. And again, it's just a nice organizational tip to keep yourself focused and grounded. Jambalaya is a classic Louisiana dish. It works very well, partially because it is and isn't a thing. If you were to look up jambalaya, they're going to tell you that jambalaya is rice with seafood and chicken and pork with herbs. So what that does very nicely is if you don't eat meat, you can use a firm tofu and some of the really nice Beyond Meat ground additives, or you could just use seafood. If you don't like seafood, you don't put it in. Beautiful thing cooking from home. Jambalaya is very much what I call a Velcro dish, much like a quiche might be. If you have ham and you have chicken, you use both. Again, since we're going into a period of Lent, kind of the goal here is to use up some of the extra things, the things that would not be considered as reflective. And of course, at the time, we wouldn't be using shrimp if we were keeping kosher. But hey, we're not keeping kosher. So two things that I didn't get a chance to finish. I need another piece of celery, and I figured we'd just do a little celery knife work. The key to celery, to all knives, you're going to take your hand and roll your fingers so that your knife blade rests across your knuckles. If your fingers are out, you can cut them off. Your fingers are rolled and your knife blade is against your knuckles, you physically cannot cut yourself. So when I come down and I'm going to hold whatever it is, my fingertips are going to go there and pull backwards. Or you can come as a claw and cut over it. Just going to slice that in half. Slice that there. Then I'm going to stack my celery. Just run the knife right through the celery, nice and quick. If you're ever thinking to yourself that you really want to work on your knife skills, find a nice recipe for onion soup and make onion soup for everyone you know. Because once you stand in the kitchen and you cut 50, 60 pounds of onions for soup, you will have learned some really good skills on how to hold your knife and how to handle that. If you have an onion, take the knife, take your grip, and I'm going to cut radius in that way. So I'm cutting into my onion across the natural curvature of the onion. So that might be 10 or 12, and then I'm going to turn it. I'm going to grip it top to bottom. And then when you pull your knife through, it's automatically diced. So it's nice and easy and quick. The nice thing about onions, very inexpensive. So you're going to use what you need to use. Cut quickly, cut cleanly. We got any other questions, Christine? Now's a good moment for that as we shift.
Yes, we have one question. Can you confirm the temperature of the oven for the cornbread?
So the cornbread's at 400 degrees.
Okay. And
Okay.
so far, that's it. Everybody's just intrigued. Those are amazing knife skills. We learned, oh, we got another question. We want to know, do you wear onion goggles when you cook that many onions?
I have never used onion goggles. I can tell you that, as we may have learned from the help, if you do have an unlit match between your teeth, what that is helping you do is pull the air and you're breathing through your mouth, which decreases the oils that are hitting into your eyes. Onions can go bad. Onions that are softer are going to have more oil that is free. If you're really sensitive to onions, keep them in your refrigerator. A cold onion will not release as much of the oil into the atmosphere, and you will not have that difficulty.
Got it. And one more question, how long should we bake that cornbread for?
Cornbread is 25 to 30 minutes.
No, there she is. Okay.
Or the infinite answer, bake until done. Okay, so I have put my pan, it's a very thick bottom pan. I've got the oil in there. I'm going to go through the sausage is going to go in a moment. But while that's warming up, I'm going to go ahead and cut the pepper. There is somewhat of an argument in the restaurant industry on the best way to cut the pepper. I'm going to show you how I cut a pepper because it's me. So I'm always going to come in and I'm going to cut the bottom part off because the bumps make it lopsided. So I'm going to cut that, and I now have a flat surface. With a flat surface, I have control of the fruit or vegetable. So again, my fingertips rolled under my fingers, and I'm going to follow along the natural bumps. It's going to come off. You can see the green piece on the pepper. I'm going to come off that by about a centimeter, and I'm just going to roll straight down, turn, roll, turn, roll, turn. You see a pattern there developing. And what you end up with is that. Very little waste. It's all there. And if you want to, you can then cut the top off so you just have seeds. I'm not going to eat the seeds. If you are using a hot pepper, the oils that make spicy peppers spicy are found in the seeds and in the white membrane. So if you like spice but not a lot of spice, don't add in seeds when you're using jalapenos, serrano peppers, etc. And you see the white membrane that's here, you can take that out, and that will decrease the spiciness in your dish also, which of course there really isn't for a bell pepper because, well, it's a bell pepper. So, but for cutting your bell peppers, you cut your nice, long, even pieces. And from a technical standpoint, a julienne is going to be a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch as a cube, and then it's a certain amount of length, 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches. For all of us that work in anything other than the Ritz, a julienne is going to be a long, straight cut of a vegetable. But you want to try to make them as even as possible, because when your food is cut evenly, it will cook evenly. So I'm going to take my stack, and again, just run my knife right through it. And now I have a dice. Try not to pack up too many slices of pepper at one time. Just going to bounce around. So the recipe that you guys got emailed says a cup of diced bell pepper, and a cup is always a nice term. I am only going to use 1 bell pepper because I don't want to cut more bell pepper than I want to use. And I'm just going to use all of the bell pepper. So if I end up with 1 1/4 cups of bell pepper, it's not going to make a difference. Cooking is not the same as baking. You can be a little bit off and it'll be okay. All right. So the pan is now warm. The oil has got a light sheen to it. So we're going to add in our sausage real quick. One of the mistakes that people will often make is they will add meat and other items to cold oil, to cold pans, and you really don't want to do that. The colder the oil is, the more the food will absorb it, and the longer it'll take to cook. Not certain if you can hear it over the exhaust of the fan, but there's a slight sizzle that's happening here. And avoid the temptation to just do a straight dump, because again, you do have hot oil in here. And so you want to put your 1 or 2 pieces in at a time. It will be okay. I know we had a question from a couple of people about the different types of sausages. Andouille sausage, a spice Italian sausage, pork sausage, beef sausage, chicken sausage. The beautiful thing about cooking for your friends and cooking at home, tofu works. Pork sausage, chicken sausage, all beef sausage. You know, the key is to just understand who your guests are, who you're cooking for, what your goal is. Chicken sausage has less fat in it, and it's going to be a little bit healthier for you. And you may decide that you want to add a little bit more cumin or a little bit more paprika to your dish if you don't think the sausage that you're using is going to be spicy enough or flavorful enough. The beautiful part about it is you really can't be wrong when you're cooking for yourself and your friends. And if your friends don't like your cooking, don't invite them back.
That's great, Clark. We have a question. What type of oil are you using?
So I always use a canola oil for things like this. Canola oil has a very high smoke point, so it's going to get nice and hot, and it has a very neutral flavor. Olive oil is a truly beautiful thing, but the flavor of an olive oil is going to get lost in the spices and the things that we're cooking tonight. So it would be a literal waste of money to use an olive oil. Sunflower oil has a great smoke point, but it's also quite expensive. So your good classic corn or vegetable oil will do really well. I'm just going to let this cook for a brief second. And now we're going to demonstrate the concept that you all learned in English class back in 9th grade, which is the best laid plans of mice and men. I laid everything out except for the plate to put the cooked sausage on. So I'm just going to take standard household plate, a little bit of paper towel so that it absorbs some of that grease, because, you know, while grease is where the flavor is, we don't want to have too much in our diet. And that is something to remember. Salt, fat, sugar are some of the things that really carry most of the flavor. Your tongue can only taste so many different flavors. And if you don't have the salt or the fat to transmit the spices, you're really never going to taste them. And that's always sad. When you're out shopping and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to get the light sour cream, I'm going to get the light buttermilk, etc. Legally, it has to only be 50% less fat or 50% less sugar than its traditional counterpart. And what is very common in the industry, if we're going to do something that is going to be reduced fat, we're going to bounce up the amount of salt and the amount of sugar in it so it still has a lot of flavor. That's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. You can often be doing yourself more harm getting a reduced fat product because you're getting in extra sodium and extra calories from your sugar. So always just make sure you're reading the actual nutrition panel and paying attention to serving sizes. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this off the heat for a second. Move the wine glass. So what you can see here is that the sausage is very brown. It's got some nice caramel coloring to it. It's getting that richness of flavor. It has not been cooked all the way through at this point, but we're going to cook it again later. So I'm actually going to pull it now, and we're going to finish it with the rest of the food. But if you do not put it in first, you're never going to get that beautiful coloring, which also brings a lot of flavor to meats. And if we want to get technical and fancy, that's a Maillard reaction, as the caramelization of the fats and the sugars in the meat, which is different from a Maillard reaction because that's a duck. Okay. If they didn't sign up for the dad jokes, they signed up for the wrong place. Hey, Christine, do you know why everybody thinks the circle is pompous?
No, I do not.
It has 360 degrees.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. I'm funnier than I
feel
think
like
I
we're
am.
all laughing at you as much as Meredith probably laughs at your jokes.
Yeah. Well, it's always important to remember what the triangle once said to the circle. You're pointless. Okay. So.
Hey, is
I wish
is Fairmount paying him extra for the jokes?
No,
I know. I had a
actually have to
laugh
back.
track for this.
All right. So we've pulled the meat out, but we have left in the crunchy bits and the oil. So now we're going to add in our onion. And our garlic. And our red pepper. And our celery, which, as my dear friend Stephanie pointed out, the onion, the pepper, and the celery in Cajun or Louisiana style cuisine is considered the Holy Trinity. You are not cooking anything in traditional Cajun cuisine without those three, which is different from traditional French cuisine, in which the celery is replaced by, the pepper is replaced by a carrot. And then I'm not cooking anything without garlic because, well, I don't want to. So what you're going to see here, we're just going to mix these around a little bit, and we're going to let them sweat. When you are sweating something, it is a softer version of a saute. If I was going to saute these vegetables, I would have them not nearly as crowded, so they're not absorbing as much of the heat when they're sweating. They're going to give off their liquid, and they're going to shrivel up a little bit and be delightful. I think the recipe that I sent you actually says to saute the vegetables, but technically it's a sweat, but most people don't understand that technical difference. So I will show you in a few moments how that looks as a sweated option. So as we are going to let this cook, we are going to pause for commercial break. So as many of you remember as proud Fairmounters, the Super Bowl has always been an opportunity, whether as when I was in high school, the kids all made sub sandwiches. Later in times, we have done opportunities for families to make a couple of gallons of actual soup, and we've offered those up for sale to our members as they leave church for the Super Bowl. Several years we have been less culinarily inclined and simply had our young people at the doors with soup pots to accept donations from the church membership. And that money has been used to support youth mission trips, supported our hunger shelters and other activities. This year, we did not have that opportunity due to our friend COVID to come together, but it's just an opportunity. No one is obligated in any way, but this would be an opportunity as a moment of fellowship in food. If you would like to, Christine will put a link in the message board, and that money can go towards our youth mission trips, because one day soon, COVID will end and we will have the opportunity to encourage our youth to be active in their greater community, whether that be down the Dominican Republic or simply to be active in the Greater Heights community of faith and fellowship. So that's our commercial. You know, just better than this event brought to you by Ford. Of course, probably got more money from Ford. Anyway. So it's important when you're in the kitchen, honestly, try to stay hydrated. Make sure that you are drinking water, drinking liquids, because it's hot in here. And literally, if it's too hot in the kitchen, get out. For Lent, for Jambalaya, I will be cooking and drinking with white wine because it makes me happy. All right, so from the sweating, you can see the steam coming off, and I'm going to give this a little bit of a tilt, and hopefully in our questionable camera, you can see there's an actual pool of liquid that's forming down here, and that is much more liquid than we had in the pot when we began. The vegetables have absorbed some of the fat from the oil, and they are starting to give off their liquid. Celery in particular holds a lot of liquid. Things that I learned as a high school varsity wrestler, it takes more calories to eat and digest celery than celery contains, which is why we eat it with peanut butter. It tastes better. But celery is mostly water. So there's your thought for the day. Weight loss by running in plastic bags. Okay, so we've got our onions, our celery, our bell pepper, garlic. I'm now going to go ahead and I'm going to start adding in my herbs. I've got my dry oregano. Put that in. I'm going to put in my thyme. I'm going to add in a blend of Cajun seasoning. Someone had asked earlier if I had a preference for Cajun seasoning, and my fast response was no. However, I will say that Paul Prudhomme, probably mispronounced, has been a very long-standing Louisiana chef, a TV personality, and he does have a beautiful Creole seasoning. You can also, thanks to Google, make your own at home if you're not going to do a lot. You're looking for filet, you're looking for paprika, you're looking for a little salt, some red pepper, maybe some cayenne, give a little bit of a kick. And one of the advantages of blending your own seasoning is you always then get to control for heat. I know that my mom, hi mom, does not like a lot of heavily spicy foods. Steph Washlock is not ever going to go visit India because she cannot eat anything on the subcontinent because of the temperature of the food. I like things that are very, very spicy, so it's always an option. Okay, so, oh, it smells so lovely, and you can kind of see how the pepper, if you push down with your paddle, you can pretty much cut the pepper in half. And so I'm going to say that my vegetables are now, and I quote, soft. So we're going to add in our next ingredients. There's going to be 20 ounces of diced tomatoes. Rotel does a great job with this. They're diced tomatoes with green chilies. It is you can do, if you are really heat sensitive, you can use a straight crushed or a petite diced tomato. I like the ones with the chilies. And after all, this is a Louisiana style dish, so a little spice is going to be kind of what you're banking on there. You can set that for a second, and I'm going to check on our friend the cornbread. Oh, does that smell lovely? So for those of you who are baking at home, you actually have smell-o-vision. For those of you who are not, you're missing out. What you'll notice is it is lightly browned across the top edges. So it's nice and crisp. It's begun to crack a little bit. So I know that when I stick my knife in, it's going to come out crystal clear and clean. This is going to be a beautiful piece of accoutrement, side dish. A little bit of honey and some orange zest whipped in with that, or orange zest in your butter, is going to make a lovely, lovely breakfast treat. We're going to hand that off to Miss Washlock. Okay. Steph, our sous chef extraordinaire. We know this because she wears shoes. But I'm funny. Okay.
All right, Clark, I just want to say thank you. I have to go because it's bath time for my children, but we had so much fun, and I'm hoping somebody brings us something to eat.
I'm certain that we will make sure that you get fed, my friend. Enjoy bath time. Watch out for sharks and whales.
We will. We're very careful.
Yeah, we're very careful.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye, Lindsay. Bye, Max and Oliver.
So here I have my mixture of vegetables, and I'm going to sprinkle in my rice. And this is where you get to one of those technique questions, right? It's, why is XYZ person's food better than somebody else's food when everyone's following the same recipe? I have a dear friend of mine, David Lowe. I would eat anything that man makes because his technique is so precise. It helps. He graduated top of his class from the CIA in Hyde Park. So what I've done here is I've put the rice in, and I'm actually going to stir the rice into the vegetable. We're going to make sure that we're going to give this rice a moment to start to absorb that liquid that's in there from our cooked vegetable. Because we do have water, we do have vegetable juice, for lack of vocabulary. We're going to give that a little stir. So long grain rice is going to take longer to cook than a short grain rice, which is why we use long grain in a dish like this, because we want it to have all the time to absorb all of the flavors when we do this. So if you were doing this and you dumped in your water, your vegetable stock, your chicken stock right off the bat, the rice is going to start to absorb that flavor first. And it's not going to have quite as much flavor as it will when you let it absorb the sweated or sauteed vegetable. And you can see, maybe, that we're getting a light bubble. It's a little bit of a starting to boil. So normally I would probably let this rice sit in here for 3 to 4 minutes and really kind of start to dry out and get crisp. Let's call it 3 minutes, depending on your heat level, as in the flame. And I am on a medium flame right now. Let it just really absorb that. So everybody on here is a nice, wise and mature adult. We have, I believe, only one token young person in the crowd, and we did have some problems with some people and the younger generation is having a fit on the internet because they went to Chipotle and they were complaining that there was a leaf in their food. It is the bay leaf. We keep it whole so we can pull it out easily, but the bay leaf is supposed to be there. It is a lot of flavor. Okay, so now we're about a minute in with the rice and vegetables. Slowly add. So if you have the means and opportunity, never cook rice in water. Cook rice in a vegetable broth, cook rice in a chicken stock, cook rice in a blend of water and broth or stock. Rice gets most of its flavor, of course, if you like just rice flavor, game on. But cook it with a flavored liquid, it's going to carry much more. The rice is going to absorb that. For my house, when I'm making most rice dishes, I'm using about a third a lemon or a lime juice and the rest of it water. For those of you who like places like Chipotle and other pseudo-Mexican dishes, they're doing about a 50-50 water to juice blend. So the rice really carries a lot of that flavor. But if you have the chance to add flavor to your dish by using something other than water, that is a great way to do that. Just going to give it a little bit of a stir, make sure that nothing's sticking on the bottom. Make sure that my bay leaf is in there nice and tight. I'm going to drop a lid on this. I'm going to turn it up so I start to get that nice soft boil. Take that moment to turn off the oven. We have any fun questions, my dear friend Christine?
No, I think we're good right now, but I love the idea of cooking rice in a liquid. So if you were making Mexican, would you want to maybe put lime juice in the water?
I always, unless my child is yelling at me, use lime or lemon juice when I'm doing a Mexican dish. I also will add salt to the water because salt really brings it out and it does a beautiful thing. And so.
And we do have another question. Did we put green onions in yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Hey, Clark, does the same principle apply to other grains like quinoa?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was just like when you think about your pasta, why do you salt water for your pasta? Is to make sure that you get that flavor in. And quinoa is such a beautiful thing. And if you were to add a little bit of citrus, I've actually used orange juice when I do the red and older ancient quinoa blended together. I'll use a little orange juice and it comes out lovely. But again, I'm only using about 1/3 orange juice or lime juice and 2/3 the regular water. So at this point, I've got a slight boil going on over here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in my cooked chicken. If you were doing a tofu, you would make sure that you have pressed the tofu, got almost all of your liquid out and nice and firm, and then give it as small of a dice as your tofu will allow. Tofu will bring a nice texture to the party, and it is going to absorb all of the flavor. So I would make sure that if you're looking to do this more of a vegetarian style dish, that I would make sure I'm using a really nice vegetable broth to add your tofu into. Okay. And then I'm going to also add back in my mostly cooked sausage. I'm be sad that I no longer have a dog, as I thoughtfully put one on the floor in memory of my dog, because gravity is a equal opportunity offender for all of us. Just going to make sure I get my bay leaf down nice and settled. I just recently started spending more time on social media over the last couple of months, and I was just torn apart by the number of people that were literally filing complaints about the leaf in their food. And I don't often work with bay leaf, but every time I see it, it really reminds me of that. So the green onion and the parsley. So the green onion is very much for the garnish, and the parsley, because for me, I think parsley really wilts very quickly. I'm going to let this cook for a few minutes, make sure the rice is nice and tender and beautiful, and then I'm going to add the parsley in when I add in my shrimp. And I'm going to add my green onion right there at the very end because it'll have a nice sharp bite, and then it looks pretty. And really, it's about looking pretty. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Oh no. I should know better than to touch the thing. Like I lost myself. All right, so we now just have a simmering pot. We're gonna simmer for about 15 minutes or so cooking time. So questions, thoughts, concerns, opportunities to be together.
Hey, Clark, I have a question. It's Christina.
Hi, Christina.
Hi. So my skillet pan is not big enough. Can I transfer everything to this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And yes, Jesse, your stock should be in at this point. So one of the beautiful things about cooking is as long as you're willing to clean the pot, you can always upgrade your pot, right? So this is a 8-quart pot that I'm in. It is technically a pan, as Steph likes to remind me, because its base is wider than its sides. A pot has sides that are taller than the base. In case you ever wondered what the technical definition between a pot and a pan is. We can have some great historical conversations about why we have pots and whether or not we have them, where some of the more colloquial terms about poverty come from, but it's probably not the right crowd for that. See me after service sometime and we'll talk about some colloquial terminology. So this has got a nice, pretty rapid boil going to it. So you can kind of see it's very colorful, very flavorful. So we're just going to give that a little bit of a stirry stir, technical term. But one of the realities of all food does not like to be played with when it's being cooked. You know, you're going to boil something like this for 15 to 20 minutes. Give it a stir every 3 to 4 minutes. Control for your heat so you're not scorching. One of the biggest difficulties people have, particularly when it comes to grilling outside or open flame, people like to turn their protein. Leave it alone. If you're cooking chicken, particularly if you're cooking steaks or burgers, put it on the grill, leave it alone. Flip it once, leave it alone. Flip it back, leave it alone. The more that, and you know, the more you play, the less time it has in contact with the heat, the more that you're going to tear the food. Leave the food alone. Let the heat do its thing. Food likes to be warm. Wine likes to be cold.
Hey,
Yes.
a baking question.
Okay.
We are limiting our gluten intake and some using more almond flour. A friend gave me this fabulous recipe for like an apple cake.
Ooh.
The taste is great, but I'm still trying to play around with using almond flour or some other kind of non-gluten flour. And how do I change my ratio of egg or egg whites or baking soda, baking powder? Any suggestions?
So that is a great question. And particularly baking is so chemistry driven, right? You know, baking powder has the sodium bicarbonate and an acid, so it activates with just liquid. Baking soda doesn't have the acid, so it needs an acid as well as a liquid. My recommendation for learning to use non-traditional flour is to go to the celiac disease official website. A lot of people will have some gluten intolerance or some gluten allergies. Some of that is more due to the way the food is processed and handled, unfortunately. But people that have celiac have a very clear line about what they absolutely cannot have. So if you go to the celiac website, if you go to a good, if you find a Facebook group or something that really is catered towards people who suffer from celiacs, that will be a great resource for how to make those changes. If you're looking for fun alternative flours, one of my most favorite shops in the entire city of Cleveland is the import shop at the West Side Market. It is built into the corner, cheese, pasta, etc. They have the largest selection of non-traditional flours. It's a weird sentence. Of alternative non-gluten flours of any place I've ever been in. The employees there are very knowledgeable and they can really help you out. Great people. I shop there on a very consistent basis. Wonderful, wonderful people. Also, if you are a cheese eater and you go down like on a Wednesday afternoon when it's not real busy, they will walk you through that entire cheese case and let you sample literally everything. They're great people. They're dear friends of mine. I cannot recommend them enough. And you don't really notice the flours because they're right on the left as you enter. But really great people. I highly encourage them. Plus, you then get to shop local, which is always a benefit. If you are looking to be a little more price conscious, Mark's carries a full line of Red Barn. Red Barn is a very old mill house, and they have a large variety of not only non-wheat based flours, but they now have brownie mixes and cookie mixes that they've put together that are non-wheat based. So that's a great resource. And I've never found a better selection of the Red Barn than I do at the Mark's, particularly the Mark's that's off of Ridge. Yeah, one by Stealth over at Ridge in Parma. Great selection. I don't know if it's because not a lot of people in Parma are buying the gluten-free options, but it is. So now we've got a nice bubbling, gotten some time. We give it a little bit more of a stir, and you can feel you can't feel, but I can feel with my spatula that I'm getting a little bit of crispness. What some people might say, oh, you're burning on the bottom. You're really getting a nice caramelization, a nice flavor. We kind of want that because it's flavoring, right? It's not burnt until the flavor is such that you don't like it. Anything before you don't like it, it's just caramelization. In case you ever wondered what the difference between burning something and caramelizing something was. So there goes my parsley. I'm gonna give that a turn.
Hey, Clark, was that parsley chopped or?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is a finely minced parsley. So when I do my flat leaf parsley or even cilantro, I take away 90% of the stem and then pile the leaves on top of each other, roll it into a cigar shape, and then run my knife through it. Okay, at this point, I'm going to add in my shrimp. I got really large shrimp because they make me happy. These are 1620s. I peeled and deveined them myself, and then I cut them in half. It is a gratuitous amount of shrimp, but you know, given that we're going into Lent, and this is a feast of gluttony for Fat Tuesday's directions, I'm not really going to be eating a lot this way over the course of the next 40 days or so. Pastor Jesse, is there a reason why Presbyterians traditionally don't have a surrendering of a thing the way the Catholics and the Episcopalians and the Lutherans do? Is that just because we protested too much, or what's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is because we protested too much, and I'll give my husband a chance to answer this too as a pastor after I do, although he's mainly a cook tonight. But well, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think Catholics are a little more used to sacrificing than Protestant. And so the Protestant growing edge is to learn what will we incorporate into our lives that we have not done before.
Okay.
Not be so much as what we give up, because Catholics are already giving up, but we, what have we not included into our life that we may need to include as far as service and sacrifice on behalf of others? So it may not be giving up chocolate, but it may be getting to know someone who is homeless, or like you've done, welcoming someone from another country into your church. That becomes a Lenten practice that has meaning.
Yeah, and I would just add the theological reason that is that for Protestants, we can't earn our favor with God, so to speak. So Calvin was always like a little bit, I guess, uncomfortable with doing something that would earn then our favor with God. So by adding something like that we'll pray more, or that we'll get to know somebody who's different than us, is an acknowledgement that we can't earn that favor with God, because God has already given us God's favor and grace, but we respond from that place.
I really like those answers. I will say that I don't think that articulation was ever made clear in a way that I was prepared to receive that answer growing up. So I don't want to say that our previous pastors didn't articulate it. I will say that for me, my life is so hectic as a small business owner. The agreement with myself to not have something that I reflexively go to does help me be more reflective.
Yes.
But in being more reflective, I also then pray more and more considerate, or I like to think I'm more considerate.
Yes, I mean, you in essence, Clark, what you're saying is you give something up in a very Protestant way.
Well, if I learned anything being
not to earn favor with God, but you give something up in acknowledgement that it's your like cue to pray and to reflect more.
Yeah. If I've learned anything being a Presbyterian, it's that you simply need to work harder and make sure mama's happy.
Make the bottom line.
Hey, we got a couple cooking questions again.
Okay.
Let's see. On the shrimp, is it large shrimp or jumbo shrimp?
So shrimp is the only honest measured item, right? You bought eggs. You bought small eggs, normal eggs, large eggs, extra large eggs, and you lined those all up on your counter, and they all pretty much look like eggs. Shrimp are actually graded, and they're graded by number. So I bought what is considered 16 to 21, which means that they are 16 to 21 shrimp in a pound. And that holds true for every fish institution, for every boat that brings them in. That is that grade of shrimp. Shrimp then goes 16 to 21, 22 to 26, 27 to 32. So you know exactly how many shrimp within a range is in a pound. For something like jambalaya, you want a shrimp large enough to go on your fork. So I actually got larger shrimp because it was what was available at the store, and then I cut them in half. If I had a better variety, I would have probably gotten that 27 to 32 range. So they'd be about the size of my thumb, and I wouldn't have had to cut them. As you get into the really, really large shrimp, you're going to get a category that is going to be a U and a 16, or a U and a 12, or a U and an 8. And that is going to be less than 16 in a pound, less than 12 in a pound. And that's when you're starting to talk like shrimp. Great for stuffing, butterfly on the grill, a little bit of lemon butter. Those same types of gratings will also apply to lobster tails. It tries to give you an idea of how much you're actually going to get. But remember, if you're doing crab legs or lobster tails, the shell is considered part of that weight count. I saw somebody pop up a question about salt.
Yes.
So in this dish, most of the salt is coming from our chicken or vegetable broth. So we have not actually salted this dish at all, but you have an andouille sausage that has salt in it. You have a broth that has salt in it. So this is really one of those instances where taste what the chef prepared, salt to preference.
Got it. And we have a question about fish and fish fries, and then Joyce Pope is raising her hand.
Okay.
So
So-
start with Christina Seekley.
I am, my hand too.
Okay, we're gonna do Christina Seekley, then Joyce, and then you, Marilyn, okay?
Okay, okay.
So
question. Oh,
yeah, fish fry.
yeah. So the whole, I guess maybe this is more for Jesse, but maybe Clark, you know too. Where did the fish fries and also the no fish on Fridays or fish on Fridays, sorry, come from, and why don't we do it?
So I'm certain that Jessie and her husband have a much more religiously accurate comment. I would go that the fish is probably of the fisher of men parable construct, which may or may not be accurate. Why the Presbyterians don't have fish fries and bingo night and beer pong at their churches, you're not nearly as capitalistic as the Catholics are. And that would be why we don't have a fish fry at Fairmount. But, you know, the Catholics have always had an opportunity to gather in their community. And I believe it was Vatican II that finally said you didn't have to have only seafood or fish on Fridays. And that, you know, cardinal sin went away. But the fish fry was particularly in the ethnic communities around Cleveland, in Slavic Village, etc., were great ways for families to come together. And that's why if you're in the Slavic Village neighborhoods and the old churches, if you're down in Parma, these are still huge, very, very important activities. The steel mills in Cleveland had a reputation of literally going to Ellis Island, and they would hire an entire boatload of immigrants, and they would bring the entire boat in. The families, sometimes the physical boat would come through the channels, and the families would use some of those early boats, those early things to build their church, and it would be their communal location. The steel mills in Cleveland used it as a way to prevent unions from forming, because it made sure that not everybody spoke the same language and had the same ethnic and cultural traditions. So Cleveland, while a lot of people think of that area around the steel mills as being very white, is still very ethnically and socially and culturally diverse. And each group would have its own style of fish and its own traditions around religious holidays. And it was a way to manipulate labor, but also as a tradition to allow those families to celebrate. And I'll defer to the pastors for its religious intent. But that's the history of Cleveland fish fries.
And I'll just add a little like West Side, East Side perspective, maybe, that because we're so Catholic over here on the West Side, that many of the Protestant churches do have fish fries, including my husband's church, John Knox. Not this year. Are you doing it this year?
No,
Not this year.
the past 3 years.
But normally, like, they rebuilt their kitchen with a fryer to
3 fryers, and the entire church smells like a fish fry. That's the one drawback. But it's also become a chance for hospitality, kind of welcoming the community in and serving them and taking care of them and watching them enjoy and stay for a little while because they just like a chance to be together. So maybe next Lent, we'll bring back our fish fry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they did it mostly for the youth, like to raise funds for the youth trips, and because it's such a prevalent thing on the West Side. But I think it's a little different over there. Like,
Mhm.
you know, normally the whole tradition comes from not having meat. So,
Yeah. That is the thing that I was a big Fairmount youth group thing when I was younger. Youth group was very built on the concept of wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, you will
Yeah.
find the presence of God. And for me as a cook and someone who believes in hospitality, the breaking of bread, the opening of your home is one of the most sacred things you can do. And I've always been a huge believer of church meals. Some of my favorite memories of Fairmount were growing up and having meals on Wednesdays that were potluck. When Steph Washlock joined the church, she and Tom Bennett and I would do food every Wednesday. And sometimes you had 15 people show up and sometimes you had 20. And yet somehow we always had enough food to feed everybody. And I really, that's probably the number one thing that I miss about the church right now is that lack of opportunity for that shared fellowship with that breaking of the bread. Communion is a wonderful thing, and I appreciate the drive-through communion opportunity, but really just having the meal. It doesn't, and for me, I speak as Clark, it doesn't always have to have a liturgy, a sermon to go with it, but simply the act of gathering. And I think in 2021, 2022, as people are just so hectic and crazed, the more that the church universal can bring people together to eat is a wonderful thing. And yes, I see the thing popping up. Last year's Fat Tuesday event was a phenomenal blessing of our community. And thank God for Vanessa and Popeye's chicken, because I made waffles for 5 hours straight.
and also you, Clark, like you worked so hard to get all those waffles out.
Yeah.
And that was really the last fellowship event we had before the pandemic shut everything down. That was it.
Yeah. And it was a magical way. We didn't realize we were going to go out with that bang, but it was a beautiful event. And it's just such a blessing when you can gather people together just to break bread and celebrate each other. It is the hallmark for me personally of what it means to be in community of faith. And that opens those doors for me to the other types of faith, the other types of Bible studies, because you're building those relationships and you're doing the things that you do. And it's a beautiful thing. I believe Elaine and my mom had a question.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, click on.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Yes,
Marilyn had a
I'm trying to get Joyce on. She's next.
Unmute. Oh, I just had a comment. I also give up something for Lent because it's good discipline to me. I give up desserts, but I still like desserts and I take them to other people. So I feel like I'm giving something that's going to give
I'm next.
discipline and more healthy, but then I'm giving it away to somebody too. So.
I'm next. I do the Tuesday night when we were all together en masse in just before the last big event. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the last big event, which people have alluded to, was just terrific. And actually there were 2 other Tuesday nights. We were supposed to eat a modest meal and talk about the first 2, I think the first 2 Tuesday nights in March, when we met together in a small group. And then of course that was also shut down.
Yeah.
But it was really nice. And anyway, but my other questions are, also St. Constantine Church on Mayfield Road in Cleveland Heights has a very good Greek style dinner where you can get calamari, for example, and shrimp. You don't have to get fried fish only. And of course, the Slovenians, go to Slovenian. Where the Slovenians are, out on East 60, out on Beachland Ballroom. Next to the Beachland Ballroom is the other best. And they're going to go back again. They're going to have them again this year. Socially distanced, but you can get fish on Fridays. Well, I guess starting next Friday.
Yep.
This Friday, right after. Okay,
and I'm more than happy to do something like this. Again, this is fun for me. This is the first time that I've done this setting. Other times that I've done cooking like this has actually been on live television, where you don't get to even exhale. They're like, you've got 6 minutes and go. And you're like, it's a 15-minute dish. They're like, you get 6 minutes. And you really practice the magic of television. Here are the dishes, done. And actually, those are also a lot of fun. New Day Cleveland, for a plug for them, New Day Cleveland does a wonderful job supporting local chefs and small businesses by bringing them on regularly. I saw something pop up. The shrimp is done, but the rice is not. Is that from Jesse? Is that a question?
Yeah, that's a question. Should I just cooking it on low and let the rice keep cooking, and shrimp will be okay?
The shrimp will be fine. They might get a little bit more tough. You can also, depending on how undone your rice is, you can simply turn it off and leave it covered, and the rice will absorb. Depending on your rice, if you need to add in a little white wine or a little bit more stock, that might help it absorb some of that extra liquid. One of the most beautiful things about things like jambalaya and etouffee and anything that comes out of Louisiana, it is always going to be better the second day when it gets a chance to blend. It reheats beautifully. It freezes beautifully. You do want to make sure if you're going to freeze it, particularly if you're using something like glass, that you're giving headroom for it to expand. Also, if you're going to freeze it and you know that you're going to freeze it, say that you're a smaller family, you can actually take saran wrap on your baking sheet, saran wrap it, pour out your jambalaya, spread it out nice and flat. Give that 35, 40 minutes just in the open air to start to cool. Slide that into your refrigerator, bring it down, and then once it's nice and cold, put it in your Tupperware, seal it, and freeze it. That works really well for really anything you're going to want to chill. The more you can spread it out and let the steam escape. Otherwise, you can get really unpleasant texture from the rice or pasta. So, all right. So this dish over here is done. I've taken my cornbread. I've got my 4 pieces here, and then I'm going to give it into thirds because cornbread is one of my most favorite treats. If your cornbread goes stale, put it into a Ziploc bag. Sorry about that, with a little technical difficulty. And thank you, Elaine. It's a nice piece of history there. I'm very good for food, not so good for technology. But this is what my final dish looks like. A little green onion, the jambalaya, and the cornbread. And as appropriate, a nice little fork. And we're gonna pass that to our friend Steph. I will say that you don't need to necessarily have an adult beverage while you're doing this. However, something that is acidic, an apple juice, a grape juice, a white wine, acids will help lift the fats off of your tongue, and you'll be able to taste more of the spices. So I do think that is a nice touch, and even a nice apple cider, like non-alcoholic apple cider does very well for opening up the tongue as you eat, because a lot of the fats will coat your tongue, you get less flavor. And I still don't have a fork.
I sent you a fork.
I gave it back to you. uh,
Hey, Clark, question for you about the green onions.
yes.
Do you put just the top dark green part of the green onions on top, or does it matter?
So I actually do about the top, I do the white part and about 1.5 to 2 inches of the softer green. And I give that a really thin slice and I mix those together because I want the color of that green, but I want the bite of the raw onion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you don't cook that part necessarily. That's just you're adding it in at the end when you're dishing it up.
Correct. It's just pure, it's pure garnish. Or as they say in the restaurant business, it's the difference between a $5 plate of pasta and a $11 plate of pasta.
I'll take the 11. Thank you.
Wonderful. Does anybody have any other questions about cooking in general? This is such an informational night.
Yeah, I wondered if Clark could go back to the flour measuring, because of course I was educated in the 80s and 90s when you leveled off the flour, the cup with a knife. And I want to make sure I have, it sounded like you were advocating something different, like the filling of the cup.
So a lot of people will take their larger flour bins. And so we have a large bin of flour. And a lot of people are going to take this and they're going to do something silly, like just grab a scoop of it. And what a lot of people will try to do is stick their device into their tub and press it against the side of the wall.
Yeah.
And you can see how flat that is. It's very packed down. You don't want to pack things down. So you're going to actually take the scoop, which I keep in my flour, and I'm going to take my measuring cup, and I'm going to pour the flour into the measuring cup so that it in and of itself is loose. Give it a little shaky shake, and then just push off or scrape down, like you said, the top of that. But this has probably, by weight, 1 ounce less flour in it than it does if I pack it against the side.
And that's the piece I needed.
And that is the biggest difference. Baking, and you'll find so many people out there that are phenomenal bakers and really crappy cooks, or people that are phenomenal cooks but can't bake to save themselves. Cooking, I have an extra 3 ounces of red pepper, throw it in. I'm missing a 1/2 ounce of chicken, who cares? I'm using chicken stock and I'm low, add water or wine. You cannot do that with baking. Baking is very, very precise. So if you are, and for better and worse, the internet has given us all of these resources, and anybody with a keyboard can give you a recipe instead of like the classical books. And my wife and I have a cookbook collection that dates back to the early 1800s, hundreds of books, and I still read them. If you are on the internet and you have a choice, you're looking for a rye bread recipe, a cake, brownie, anything. If you can get it to give you how many grams of flour, how many grams, that is a well-written recipe. That is a recipe put together by the Culinary Arts Institution, Good Cook, Cooking America, versus Clark, gave you a bread recipe, and who knows what research went into it. The more you can do in grams or ounces, because we're Americans, game on, but you're always better to weigh your baked goods so much more accurate. And then if you are making a lot of Christmas cookies for friends and family, and you want to make sure everyone's the same cookie, if you weigh it, you know exactly what's happening. And that causes a lot of problems. If you're moving someplace, you get a newer oven that you're not used to, making sure that you've got consistent input will balance out the other parts. You're narrowing down what might be wrong with something, and it might not cook well.
Clark, I've seen those references to grams, particularly in like bread recipes and sourdough recipes. And I'm realizing I don't have a weighing system. So what can I get that's like a,
Wow.
okay.
That's advanced.
So this sits in the third drawer. I use this every single day. When we next come together, you will notice that there's considerably less of me than there was this time last year. Every morning, I weigh out my breakfast. I weigh out parts of my dinner because that's good for my health. But from a cooking standpoint, this is, who makes this? It does not say who's making it, which is kind of sad. Oh, I'm sorry. It's an OXO brand. And it's wonderful for these reasons. The base comes off. So I can put this base in the dishwasher or just in hot soapy water if I need to, if I get something sticky and gross on it. This base, a wet, warm paper towel or cloth to clean it up. And then the base just snaps right back into place. Even better, and a lot of people have this problem, if you're weighing a cup, it's very easy to read the digital scale, right? But if you're putting a larger bowl on here, you can lose sight of the scale. I love this. It comes out. It is absolutely silly, but it is such a wonderful tool because if you have a bigger bowl, it doesn't do you any good if you can't read it. Things that you're going to look for, this self-calibrates, so there's a countdown every time you turn it on, but it has a 0 or a tear button. So when you put your bowl on it, you hit 0, and you're now measuring what's in it instead of the bowl and trying to do math in your head. And then because I'm super fancy, mine does grams as well as ounces. And that's something you're going to want to have if you're going to go buy something. Make sure that it does grams and ounces, which obviously then gives you the kilos and pounds. Buy bigger than you think you're going to need as far as not the size of it, but the capacity. This thing will weigh up to 11 pounds of product. So when I'm making a big batch of chocolate chip cookies, I'm not having to goof around. I can weigh it all out in one bowl. So that's a nice touch. If you're getting really carried away, I also have a jeweler's that will get all the way down to a milligram. Actually, it'll do hundredths of a gram of really high-end saffron and other spices. But this is probably the most important thing next to a sharp knife you can have in your kitchen. And a fire extinguisher. Knife, fire extinguisher, one really good pan, and a scale, and you can conquer the world.
Thank you, Clark. That was so helpful.
Very good. Wow.
We should have all of those in our next church season box.
The church cookie box. I love it.
Yeah. I do think you can get them on. Our friend from Jeff Bezos has them for sale for like $10.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Chocolate chip cookies in the next box.
Oh, yes. Oh.
After Lent. After Lent.
After Lent. After Lent. There's just something magical about a chocolate chip cookie, although chocolate chip cookies are always made by grandma.
Oh.
Period.
Well, some of us, I look around here and some of us are, aren't we? Not all of us.
I mean, that's just a rule of life. Grandma's cookies are better.
Joyce is a grandma. I'm a grandma.
Yeah.
Elaine?
Yeah.
He is a grandma. I thought so. Doesn't she? She still has her black hair, but she's a grandma.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why grandma's cookies are better, and my mom will tell you the stories, when you were little, and you were in my mother's house, or if grandma came to visit, you got to start eating cookies the moment you got out of bed, because it was grandma. and grandma was all about, mostly for my favorite recipe in the world is my mother's peanut butter cookie recipe. Grandma was the best, but because grandma, you don't have to wait for dessert because she's grandma, right? So grandma's win.
You start with.
So yeah, if you guys have any other questions, I'm here for you. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I also, because of my formal business, I do specialize in various cocktails. If you ever have a cocktail question or something you're interested in, or a non-alcoholic version of a cocktail, because not everybody needs to or should be drinking, I'm there for you.
Well, thank you. This has been just an amazing night. And again, this is recorded, so I'm going to edit it down. And you'll be able to go through it. Thank you so much, Clark. I want everybody to use the reactions, and I want you to give a thumbs up if you think that we should sometime in the future do maybe another cooking class, maybe as we're getting ready for summer grill season.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Here, let me get my hand right here. Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah. I only have 3 different grills.
What?
I only have 3 different grills, so that might be a challenge.
No, we're always up for a challenge here at Fairmount. And if everybody enjoyed this, we're going to be doing more stuff. In fact, this Friday we have Elaine will be leading us on our Naturebation nature trivia. So please sign up. This is going to be a lot of fun, very interactive. Love to see all of you guys again. And I think it looks good. And we're going to be doing a lot more of this. I think this is a lot of fun. And who knows, maybe by this fall, we can even do an in-person cooking class in our kitchen. That would be just so much fun.
Okay.
We definitely.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I would love to. I didn't cook tonight. I kind of got the information late, but learned a lot, and it was fun, hearing from all of you. So I would definitely do this again. Let's do more of these.
Yeah. I enjoyed this. I don't think so much like Clark cooking, because you guys, or teaching, because you guys are all accomplished in your own rights, but I have a little bit of a diverse background, and it's been really nice to hear other people's voices and the things that they can bring to the table from their experience. The beautiful thing about food is it brings people together, and there really isn't, my apologies to the French, not one way is correct.
It's okay.
It's so good to hear you say that. I have a friend from France who disagrees with that statement. Drives me insane.
Yes. Although I will say that Monaco is one of my top travel destination desirabilities, partially because they spent 70 years under French rule and their food is just phenomenal. So, the French did a lot of damage as a colonial power, but they really brought a lot of influence to the overarching food rules world. And they were the first to formalize definitions of what food is and is not. But food is what you want it to be. And the best part of cooking, if it's not good, order a pizza or eat all of it. Nobody will know.
Very good. Hey, Jesse, do you want to take us out with, close this with some thoughts for tomorrow?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. So tomorrow is Ash Wednesday, and it's been really fun to gather tonight. And, in some ways it feels like Lent like we've been on Lent for the past year with the pandemic, giving up things and refraining from things. But I think this is the chance tomorrow to really dig into, this is where we are, and God will meet us here. So what will we discover about ourselves and about the world and about our faith in this Lenten season? So I really enjoyed being with all of you. And I hope that you'll join me on the Ash Wednesday tomorrow and throughout Lent, just thinking about how God can meet us. So thank you very much. And it's been fun for the two of us to join you.
Mhm.
So
Thank you, Clark.
It's absolutely my privilege, and thank you all for the opportunity to have some fun. It was also a really good excuse to scrub down the kitchen counters real well.
and Clark, we learned a lot from you.
So much.
You're a very gracious teacher, and we have a lot more to learn. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful Lenten season, and you know, Fairmount is a beautiful and magical place, and we are more than a building. We are a community. So thank you to each and every one of you for what you bring to the table.
Thank you, Clark. So true.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Clark.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.